contributing writer to the coach's site twice a month.
Well, Hal, I'm going to ask you a question that we'll see where this goes. When I checked your bio, much like older people on our site, we've got pretty long bios, but yours is one of the most impressive I've ever seen. So I'd like you to tell me a bit about your background. When you finished playing, where did you go? How did you get involved formally with coach education in Minnesota? And you spent a number of years doing that. And then now you're at the point where, like myself, you're just looking for things to do to stay active to help the game. So go ahead, Hal, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Wally. So I'll give you the Cliff Note version, because as you met, the printed version's 3 pages. So I played high school hockey. I grew up in Minnesota playing outdoor hockey, pond hockey, but we only had a couple indoor rinks in the whole state. And so we're talking in the 50s and 60s. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
And then I ended up going to a boarding school in Colorado Springs and played hockey there. It was not Shattuck. But we had a pretty good team, because most of the kids were from Michigan, Massachusetts, and Minnesota. So we had a pretty good group of hockey players. And a guy named Murray Armstrong, who was the coach at the University of Denver, sort of recruited me to come to Denver as a walk-on, along with 2 other kids, another kid from Colorado Springs, and then a kid from Minnesota named Bobby Krieger. And when I got there, I realized that sometimes you end up getting recruited to a college, maybe because your GPA is so high, but the star players are so low and they need to balance. Well, that wasn't the case. What I had was an American passport. And Denver had won the national championship that prior spring with a 100% Canadian team. And Minnesota was threatening to drop them from their schedule. I didn't know any of this till a few years later. So when I started skating, I realized pretty quickly that I was probably player number 28 or 27, and I probably wasn't going to play hockey there. So I left Denver and went to the University of Minnesota to play. In those days, again, you were ineligible, but Minnesota had a JV team, and I ended up on the JV during the ineligible period and hurt my shoulder. Well, that was when checking from behind was highly encouraged, and got slammed into the boards, and my shoulder didn't take it too kindly. So I had to sit out for a while, and while I was out, a guy called and said, "Hey, we need help coaching a midget team." Midgets in Minnesota was U16, so you go from bantams to midgets if you weren't in high school. And I said, "Well, I don't know, I'll try it." That was in the fall of 1972, I think, and I've been coaching ever since. I really enjoyed it. I liked it, and so I did midget hockey for 6 years in 2 different places. And then I went into junior. I started a junior team, and we went twice to national championships, 2 of the 3 years out and the championships were out in New Jersey, which was interesting. Brian Mullen was on one of those teams. I think he ended up playing on the National Hockey League. His father was the Zamboni driver at the Garden in New York. But I just kept going, and I had a fair amount of success as a coach. And for a while I thought it was me, but it turned out it was just I had really pretty good players. And then I got kind of bored. I go, there's got to be more to this than how many games you win. And so I just started. I started reading as much as I could and going, was a little harder in those days, right? Because there was no internet. There, it was tough. I have the Russian hockey packet that I bought, the Can-Am hockey. Here it is. The Can-Am hockey had put together back in the early 70s. And I thought that was amazing. And so I got really curious about how other people play hockey and how to train hockey players. And then it's like every decade, something changes. The game changes, how you teach the game changes, the rules change, the players change. But the game doesn't change a lot. Being an athlete, hello, Sammy. The game doesn't change a lot, but the people who play the game change. And the coaches, the coaching strategies have changed, I think, for the better as years have gone by. And so there was a group of guys here in Minnesota that started a coach education program. And then when USA Hockey was headquartered in Minnesota and had one full-time employee, and they moved it to Colorado Springs because the Spencer Penrose Foundation, a guy out there, was going to give them free office space at the Broadmoor. And so I think two of them, I guess they had two employees, and they moved out there and started the USA Hockey home office out there. And these local guys, one is a guy named Dick Emmeheiser, and then another fellow, Bob O'Connor, who was with a number of our Olympic teams, and he was an East Coast Providence guy. He played on a line with Lou Lamoriello when he was at, I think, Providence College. And Lou was the general manager of one of the teams out there. Anyways, Bobby was a really good guy, but in those days, high school hockey was kind of the gig. And even though I'd been coaching in the United States Hockey League for 4 years, I had pretty good upward trajectory. I ended up coaching at the National Sports Festival in 1982. Lou Vero was the incoming Olympic coach after Herb Brooks. And that was all Division I players. We had 4 teams out there. And I had the honor of coaching the Midwest team. And so I kept moving my way up as a coach in terms of the types of players I was coaching and the quality of players. And I thought that was really lucky on my part because there wasn't any way I was going to end up coaching a national team because they give that to their college buddies to do. College coaches get those jobs in the United States, and our pro coaches do. I did realize when I was coaching the United States Hockey League, I was getting paid $5,500 for the season in a rental in a leased car, and so I had to have a day job, sort of like the old days in Canada. And you had to work in the factory and play hockey at night, and so I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life because I was in my early 30s, and I figured that hockey would always be here, and I better go get a job too and make hockey my avocation rather than my vocation. So I went in the financial industry so I could go to the rink at 3 o'clock every day. And so that's sort of the short story. Along the way, I've ended up I was in the first sort of iteration of the coach education program in Minnesota, and then USA Hockey took it over. It was a volunteer program that was not required. And so it was a lot of fun, and they needed help. So I became an instructor running clinics. And then they changed it to the CEP coach education program. In the early 90s, they made it mandatory because, for a lot of good reasons. And also, I think from USA Hockey's point of view, it's very profitable. It generates about $1 million a year for them. And I was involved with it. I was in the very first group. They called it the Master Clinic. They now call it level 5, and there were 20 of us in the group when we went to the training center in Colorado Springs. So all the top coaches from the United States, college coaches and pro guys came in. We were there for, I think, 5 days. It was really cool. And so, Wally, that was on my nickel. That was on, nobody paid for that. But as the coach education program developed in the early 90s, I started doing that. And then I eventually ended up coach-in-chief of Minnesota Hockey on the board of directors. For 8 years, I was also the head of the safety committee. And one of the things that I will remember forever as an accomplishment is that every time you guys put a helmet on, it's because of me. Because we did the research here in Minnesota. Every 6 days, a coach went down and had a serious head injury. And about every 7 or 8 years, a coach died, getting knocked down by players, typically younger ones. And when we did the research, it wasn't super scientific, but it was better than nothing. It was self-reported through 2 districts. And then we had a nurse follow up on the outcomes. It wasn't just coaches, it was players too. So we wanted to gather everything. And then we realized very quickly that the lower skilled players have way more injuries than the higher skilled players. And a lot of it was from body contact, especially at the Bantam and Pee Wee levels, because Pee Wee could still coach, have body contact. And the kids that couldn't skate very well, went down pretty hard and they got hurt a lot. We had a nurse follow up on all of these submissions to find out what the result was. We made a recommendation to Minnesota Hockey that they eliminate body contact at the C level and the B level, not the A level. I don't know if that was right or not. They didn't do it. But then right when we were in the middle of all of this, a coach got knocked down, coaching his 8-year-old. Had to have the helicopter ride to downtown Minneapolis to the Hennepin County Medical Center. Had his skull cracked open as he was going to die, and they saved him. His wife came to the board meeting in January with photos of her husband in his head shaved and the scar coming all the way around his skull, and then with all the restrictions he's going to have for the rest of his life. And by the time she got done, most everybody was in tears or close to it. And then the board, somebody made a motion that said coaches have to wear helmets on ice when they're on practice with their teams, and they got to buckle the chin strap, and they passed it. The Southern District of USA Hockey passed it at their next meeting, and then USA Hockey passed it at their summer meeting. They'd been trying to do it for a few years, but had gotten so much pushback. And I think one province in Canada was already doing it, and I think Canada did it after that. I was not even a voting member of it. I just gathered the information, but I had hate email for 2 years from coaches that didn't want to wear helmets and how horrible it was. And it was all my fault, which it wasn't. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. But I even had a guy tell me last year who was in our program, he played Division I hockey. He said, I was so angry at you. And then I got knocked down and hit my head. He says, I get it now. I get it. So if I've done nothing in the hockey world, I've saved a bunch of coaches from dying, and I've saved a bunch of coaches from having serious head injuries. So I don't know if that's anything. Well,
I did a camp in I remember Michigan or something like that, and Wilkinson, an ex-NHL goalie, his dad died in Windsor. He got his kid, how they slide into the circle. Kid slid in and took feet from under him, and but it was funny. This summer, Hockey Canada, I went to the under 18 women and men and the under 20, and no coaches were wearing helmets in Calgary at Winsport.
You know,
It's a rule.
here,
That is?
yeah, in
None
the
of them
United States, the rule was passed by USA Hockey, but the junior coaches don't have to wear them because they're professionals. That was the deal they cut with the junior coaches.
Well,
And
these
high
guys
school
were
coaches don't.
coaches, but
Yeah, high school coaches don't wear them here either. They get hurt. They get knocked down and or they get hit with pucks and get hurt. And so, anyways, so that Wally, that's sort of the short story. I have tried so many ways to help kids become better hockey players. I'm always trying. I tried the Billy Beanie's, the Swedish torpedo or whatever they call that thing. Well, Tom probably knows that. And I've tried so many different ways to help kids become not only better individually, but teams to play better, to play better hockey. And now I coached high school hockey for 15 years with mostly B-level kids in an A league. That was fun. I enjoyed it. I'm now coaching in a smaller association in the Twin Cities. And it's a wealthy suburb. So kids seem to disappear and go on vacation during odd times. Doesn't seem to be a strong commitment. I know it's good for kids to play other sports, but they're now playing way too many sports, and they all play. I mean, I've got 3 kids on my team that are also playing. They're playing lacrosse all winter too. Because if they don't, they won't make the spring team. I mean, it's hard to compete with, and then their attention spans are super short, and so the kids we're dealing with are a lot different. One of the reasons that Wally asked me to get it in to talk a little bit was I had sent him some information about leadership and captains and how to pick captains and what the process looks like and what a captain